The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is McKenna Sturgeon. I am the Colorado Municipal League's Training and Marketing Specialist. So give me one moment, please. I'm going to turn off my camera so we can see just Karen now. So I'm going to introduce our wonderful speaker. I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. It's the second installment of our election series as we prepare for the April 2022 elections. Our webinar focuses on nomination petitions, petition packets, and signatures. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website along with the PowerPoint slides for later reference. We ask for about 24 hours to get that posted, so you can look for that tomorrow. Attendees of today's webinar can also apply for 1/2 credit with CMCA. That's the Colorado Municipal Clerks Association. To apply for that credit, you'll need to complete and submit an assessment form, which will be sent to you in follow-up after this webinar. That will also be available on our website. I'll explain more about that at the end of today's session as well. So for those new to GoToWebinar, just want to give a quick rundown really quick. You should see a control panel to the right of your screen. This is where you can ask questions. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. I'll be interrupting quite frequently throughout the presentation to make sure that we get all of those answered, so feel free to ask throughout. So now, while Karen does not need any introduction, I will say just a few words before handing the mic over. Karen Goldman, MMC, currently runs the Municipal Clerk Advisor Program, which was created by CML, CIRSA, and CMCA as a free service to assist municipal clerks with specific job-related questions. Karen has 20+ years of experience as both a municipal clerk and trainer. CML is greatly appreciative of Karen's help editing the 2021 and previous election books. We also want to express our gratitude for Karen hosting all of these webinars and her ongoing commitment to assisting municipal clerks. Thank you for all that you do, Karen. I'll kick it over to you now.
Okay, thank you, McKenna. Good afternoon, welcome. This is part 2 of our 2022 statutory town election webinars, and I appreciate your attendance today. As McKenna said, we want to have questions posed in real time. She will, I don't see them, but she does. And so if you want to type in your question, please do that. If the question is a little complicated, you need to explain it, or I don't understand what you typed in, McKenna will have the ability to unmute you so that we can hear you. So now that it is getting way closer to Christmas and New Year's, I am assuming that you all have your election calendars completed or very close to completion. And before I start today on this particular topic, I just want to go over one thing that has come up lately on the listserv, for those of you who've been following it, regarding the creation of the calendar, and especially consideration of when something goes before or after a weekend deadline. So, and I think that the conversation that we've had about this surrounded the date for the last date that somebody can be a write-in candidate. So let me go back and explain computation of time a little bit, hopefully a little bit clearer. So if you look at the state statute on computation of time, it basically tells you what to do if a deadline falls, and I'm going to say this word with great emphasis, on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. Now, if it has anything to do with the nomination petition process, especially the filing of the petition, amending the petition, and withdrawing from nomination, if any of those dates fall on a Saturday, Sunday, or a weekend, the last date to do this is the Friday before, the last business day before. But only those things. You'll notice that what I did not list was a write-in candidate. Now, if you look at the statute for write-in candidate, it says that if you have the ordinance that requires an affidavit of intent to be a write-in candidate, somebody must file that notice of intent prior to a date which is a Monday, which means that the last date is a Sunday. And remember, that's not the date on which it happens. The date on which it happens is the Monday, and it's prior to. So because it says prior to, and remember last time when I talked about calendars, I told you to pay attention to words like prior to, no later than, before, those kinds of things. Because it says prior to, and it's not one of those ones that go backwards, you still can't move it to the following Monday because it says prior to that Monday. So in this case, again, you have to go back to the Friday before. Now, having said that, many of you know, and many of you don't know, that I've been keeping a very long list of things that I would love to see the legislature change in the municipal election code based on administrative practices. And this whole computation of time thing, and whether you go forward and backward, I think is pretty confusing. So what I would love to do, and we'll see, if it makes sense, would be to change some of these deadlines so that they never, in a regular municipal election, you never have to deal with, do you go backwards, do you go forwards. Anyway, I wanted to make sure that that got talked about before I move forward, and we can talk about this at the end if you'd like. But having said that, McKenna, may I have the first slide, please? All right, so we're here to talk about nomination petitions, the petition packets, and the signatures and what you do with the signatures. So we're going to first of all start with nomination petitions. What are they? A nomination petition is the primary, and I'm going to emphasize that, the primary way a citizen can get on the regular election ballot. The regular election is the election at which you're going to elect people to office. It is also the primary way a citizen can get on a special vacancy election ballot and a recall election ballot. Now, I use the word primary because in a regular election, there also is the opportunity for somebody to apply to be a write-in candidate. And, we just spent 5 minutes talking about the deadline for that. But it is the primary way a citizen gets on the ballot. This petition is the one where statute specifically says it shall be created by the municipal clerk. And statute also provides for specific elements that have to be included in the petition, and these can be found in state statute. Okay, so other petitions, citizen petitions, initiative, referendum, and recall, you can create the petition for use by the citizens or not. But in this particular case, you shall create the nomination petition and make it available to people who want to run for office. So in a regular municipal election, regardless of whether it's going to be a polling place election or a mail ballot election, the circulation time period for the nomination petitions is the same. The first day that a petition can be picked up and circulated is 91 days before the day of the election, and it must be filed, shall be filed, no later than 71 days before the day of the election. Now remember, as we talked about last time with calendars, when you count your election days, election day is day 0. The day before the election is 1, 2 days before is 2, and you work your way backwards until you get to the 91st day before the day of the election, which I'm pretty sure is January 4th of next year. So it's coming up. It's coming up. But now that your calendar is done, you can start working on your nomination petition and your nomination petition packet. Now, in a special recall, in a special vacancy election, if you choose to fill a vacancy by election instead of by appointment, and also in a recall election, statute is silent on when the petitions really have to be turned in, which is not exactly clear. I mean, in a recall election, once the recall election date is set, then you have to have the nomination petitions available the very next business day, and statute says they have to be filed no later than, I think it's 20 days before the day of the election, which in this environment is impossible. Again, it's one of those changes we need to see to state statute. But because the petition that you use in all of these kinds of elections, your regular election, your vacancy election, and your recall election to get somebody who wants to be a successor candidate, because those petitions are exactly the same, and because the number of signatures is exactly the same as what you need in a regular election, to me, it makes perfect sense that you need to give somebody the same amount of time to obtain the signatures, which is 20 days. So what I always recommend, despite the fact you're not going to find it in statute, what I always recommend as a best practice is that since you're using the same form, the same number of signatures, you allow the same number of days to circulate the petition. Any questions?
None have come through yet.
Okay, if that case, we'll go through. We will move on to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about what the nomination petition contains. First of all, the first thing on the petition is going to be the name and the address of the person who is interested in running for office and the office being sought. So what a lot of petitions, you know, they're fill in the blank. I, blank line, who resides at blank line, you know, wish to run for the office of blank line. Now, there is a provision in statute that says a person cannot be a candidate for two positions at the same time. And that always raises the question, what does it mean to be a candidate? Is a person a candidate at the time they pick up their nomination petition? Is a person a candidate at the time they turn in their petition and the signatures are verified and the petition is valid? You know, which is it? And then there's a whole issue about being a candidate for campaign finance purposes, which I will talk about later on today. So what some people have told me happens is somebody wants to pick up two petitions and they want to fill in council or board on one and mayor for the other and hand them out and take a, you know, kind of a temperature of the citizens and see which position they would rather have him or her run for. And then that's the one they turn in. To me, that violates state statute. So what a lot of municipalities and municipal clerks do is they pre-fill in the office that their person is interested in running for. And when somebody comes in, when I come in and say, I want to run for office, someone turns around and says, what office do you want to run for? And hands them the petition with the name of the office filled in. So that's something that you can think about. And I think in that way, it prevents those kinds of arguments kind of at the end and people who are going, hey, how come somebody wants to run for both offices? And it avoids all that kind of hassle. And believe me, there are enough hassles in elections these days. We want to avoid as much as we can. So name of address of candidate and the office being sought. The next thing is a statement. It usually says, you know, we, the undersigned, you know, support the candidacy of the above mentioned. And then you have your signature lines. And the signature lines need to contain the following information: the signature of the person and the printed name. And the reason for the printed name is sometimes you can't read the signature. and it's a lot easier to read the printed name. The street name and number, in other words, the residence address, no post office box, even though in small communities, most people get their mail at the post office. The name of the city or the town, the county that the town is in, city is in, even if it's only in one county, and the date of signing. Now, you are not going to get all of those columns on one line. So what a number of people do is they divide them up and they have 2 lines for each signature, because you have to be able to read it. You'll see when we talk about verifying the signatures, you're going to have to be able to read it. And if people are going to like squish their name in, and you know, some people write really big and they're going to write over the name that was above them, and there's not going to be room for the line before them. So make it easy on yourself. Put 2 rows to contain all of these things. And my suggestion would be, don't use big borders to separate those 2 lines from the next 2 lines, because again, if people write in those black borders, you are not going to be able to read it.
Karen, we got a question really quickly.
Okay.
Do you reject a signature if the full address is not listed?
Hold that question, because I will talk about it on one of the, when I get towards the end. So hold that question. I promise you I will answer it.
Perfect.
The other thing, okay, so once you've got all your signature lines, and I always suggest you number them, and I would always suggest that on a petition you put way more lines than the signatures that are required. And you'll see what signatures are required shortly. And then that is followed by the affidavit of circulator. Now, it would have been very easy for me to list all the elements that need to be included on the affidavit of circulator, but because I always tell people to read the statutes, I am giving you the citation. So you all need to go to State Statute 31-10-302 subsection 3 and find the language that needs to be on the affidavit of circulator. Likewise, the very last page after the affidavit of circulator is what's called the affidavit of acceptance of nomination by the candidate. And again, instead of listing what that includes, I've given you the citation so that you need to go to the statute and read what it says. Now, some people call this affidavit of acceptance of nomination a candidate affidavit, which you can call it. I want to make sure that if you mentally or verbally call it a candidate affidavit, I think it's acceptance of nomination is what needs to go on the form itself. I want to make sure that you distinguish that from the financial reporting forms, and we'll talk about how that works again today. And I want to make a note of this. Nomination petitions do not contain any warning to signers of the petitions. All the other, but the citizen petitions, the recall, referendum, and initiative petitions all contain the warning. A nomination petition does not. And for those of you who've dug around in your files and you find something really old that has at the front of the petition above the signatures some information regarding a vacancy committee, I just want to let you know that the need for a vacancy committee has been eliminated and is no longer in state statute. So make sure that there is nothing regarding a vacancy committee on your nomination petition. No questions?
I have 2 more questions.
Sure.
All right, so the first one asks whether you can pre-print the county if your municipality is all in one county.
I would not do that. And here's why. It's the responsibility of the person signing to complete the petition in its entirety. And if you pre-print the county, what's to stop you from pre-printing the name of the town or the city, and then where do you stop? So I would say it is not a good idea. And then remember, if you do it on a nomination petition and you are fortunate, I'll put that in quotes, fortunate to deal with initiative, referendum, or recall, then wouldn't you have to do the same there? So I would say don't do it.
Awesome, thank you. And then the second one is for folks who are home rule, can they allow signers to not include city and county?
Home rule municipalities can pretty much do as they please. I would not do anything like that unless there was something in your code or charter that stated this is what you would put on a nomination petition. I would have some justifiable, backup for that. And also, if you are a home rule municipality located in more than one county, I definitely would not do that.
Perfect, thank you. That's all the questions for this one.
Okay, let's move on then, please. Next slide. All right, signature requirements. Statutory towns, the minimum, and you'll notice I put the minimum in the heading for this slide, the minimum is 10 signatures. For statutory cities, the minimum is 25, and then home rule municipalities can use whatever number that is determined by their charter or ordinance, or if they don't have a number, and if the number is, like the same as what's in state statute, there's usually something in the code that says that elections are conducted in accordance with Municipal Election Code of 1965. The reason that I say minimum is that I guarantee you that when you check a signature that's been turned in, you will disqualify signatures for a variety of reasons. They may not be registered. You can't read what they wrote. Their address doesn't match what's in the voter registration database. So if somebody says they only turn in 10 or they only turn in 25 and you disqualify them, then they're going to have to go out and get more in order to meet the threshold. So I always instruct, and we're going to talk about instructions in a little bit, I always instruct people to get more than what they need, but I never tell them how many, because I never know. I never know. And I want to make a note here. Statute is pretty clear that in order for them to even turn in their petition, it must contain the minimum number of signatures. If they don't, or they say, well, here's my first one, I've got another one, hanging out there that I'm still collecting, I'll bring it in tomorrow or the next day. You hand that first one back to them and you say, when you have collected all the signatures you intend to collect, then you can turn in the petition. And there's a reason for this. Number one, you don't know. You're going to start doing the work on all of this stuff. And I realize 10 signatures, checking 10 signatures or checking 25 signatures really isn't going to take you that long. But you're going to start doing the work, and then they're going to turn them in, and then you're going to do the work. And maybe when all is said and done, they didn't have enough valid signatures. So just wait. They get 20 days to get this number of signatures. It's not that difficult to do that. And then the one thing that I did include here, but the one thing that I want to make sure everybody understands is that a single person can sign as many signatures as there are positions to be voted on and that they can vote on at your election. So for example, if you are having 3 board members and your mayor on the ballot, they can sign one of the mayoral candidate petitions, even if there are four candidates, you can only sign one, and they can only sign up to 3 of the candidate petitions. And if they sign more, the way you figure out which one is to be disqualified is by the date that they have signed. So the earliest ones count, even if those petitions come in at the very end after the others, and the latest one does not. And if they sign all, let's say there are 4 people running for 3 petitions, or positions, excuse me, and you get 4 petitions and they're all signed on the same day, you don't count any of them. So I'm going to pause here to make sure everybody understands that.
So we did get one question.
Okay.
Is it okay to put the nomination petitions on the website?
A lot of municipalities do, and then they have the candidates pull them off of the website. No, well, let me ask you a question. Sorry, that's if they want to get them. Are you talking about once they're turned in? Whoever said that?
No.
Not when they're turned in, or nobody responded?
Not when they're turned in.
Okay, yeah, a lot of people put them out on their website so that, so you don't have to come in and pick them up in your office. And if you're still not going to be open to the public, that's a great way to do it.
Awesome.
Okay, all right.
That's the only question for this section.
Okay, next, please, then. Okay, so nomination petitions is only one of 2 petitions that can be cured, amended, fixed, that kind of thing. The language in statute, it uses the word cured. Okay, so here's basically what you do and how you do it. I first of all suggest that you check the signatures as the petitions are filed and not wait till the deadline. Okay, not wait till the last day. Again, if you're only checking 10 signatures, or if it's not that big a deal to do that. When you check the signatures, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can get a voter registration list from your county clerk and recorder, and you can check using that list, or you can use DEO Access. And I'll talk about DEO Access. Everything I'm going to talk about is later, it seems, but I will talk about how you use DEO Access, where you get it, how you use it. Okay, so they turn in their petitions. You're going to check the signatures, and I strongly urge you check them individually, signature by signature. So if you do that, let's say, first thing I do when I get a nomination petition is I date stamp it in to make sure that it was turned in within the legal time frame, and I count the number of lines they turned in, and I put it somewhere on the first page, circle it or something like that. So I know they've turned in above the minimum threshold or the minimum threshold. Then when I check the signatures, I check them individually, and if it's a valid signature, I put a check mark. And if it's not a valid signature for whatever reason, I develop a code, and you can use whatever code you want. WR, wrong address, which means the address doesn't match what's in the voter registration list, or NR for not registered, or IL for illegible, or DUP for a duplicate where you have to disqualify it because they signed too many. Use whatever you want, but have those available so that people know exactly why you disqualified the signature. I do the same thing on initiative referendum and recall petitions. So when you check the signatures, the number of signatures falls below the minimum, contact the candidate immediately. You can give them a call. I would follow it up with an email, something in writing, so you have a record. And then tell them that they can get more signatures. Tell them how many they need, suggest they get more than what they need, which is the same suggestion that you made originally. And what you'll do is they will get these signatures on a brand new blank petition. And the reason you give them a brand new blank petition is because when they sign their acceptance of nomination, they are accepting the nomination of the people who signed their petition before they accepted the nomination. So by adding signatures, that's not how it works. So you give them a blank new petition. And sometimes what I do is I give them more than one petition initially. And so they have an extra if they need it. And they have until, listen to this, prior to 63 days before the day of the election to cure their petitions. Now, I do know that prior to 63 days is not a weekend. I believe it's a Monday. So they have until then to obtain enough signatures to reach that minimum threshold. If they turn nothing in, they can't be on the ballot. Now, if there's a problem with the affidavit of circulator, for example, if the affidavit is not complete, the notary stamp's not on there, or there's some problem with it which can be fixed, or they forgot to write in their name the way they want it to be placed on the ballot, those are things that can be cured, and then and only then would you return to them the petition that they filed so that they could fill in the blanks, correct the notary statement, and then return it to you again prior to 63 days before the election. If they fail to do it, even though they had the correct number of signatures, they can't be on the ballot. So those are the two ways that the petitions can be cured. Any questions?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, moving right along. This clearly must be a much more, a lot easier process than creating your calendar. All right. Objecting to nominations. I am currently dealing with a municipality where somebody 5 days before an election that I'm working on, which will be held next Tuesday, somebody decided that one of the persons running for office isn't eligible to serve because he hasn't met the residency requirement. And I'm thinking, well, okay, but it's kind of too late because you see the first bullet, objection to nominations can be made in writing within 3 days after the petition is filed. If you're going to challenge somebody's ability to run for office, you have a very short timeline in which to do that, because 5 days before the election is obviously too late. And then their only chance, I guess, would be to contest the outcome of the election if the person is elected, and then it goes to the court and it's expensive and that kind of thing. So if you get, and I've to be honest with you, I've not seen this happen. However, I think it's important for you to know about it because it's one of those little things that are tucked into statute that sometimes people don't pay attention to. So somebody can object to a nomination within 3 days after the nomination petition is filed, and then you have to notify the candidate that there's been an objection, and then you are the one who decides whether the objection is valid, whether it can be fixed, and you've got basically 2 days in which to do that. Again, a very short time frame, because again, if the petition is defective and can be fixed, they got to fix it prior to that 63 days before the day of the election. That's another reason why I say don't wait to check the signatures until you have all the petitions in toward the end of that 20-day period. So if the petition is found to be what we call defective in either form or substance, it can be amended or refiled within 3 days after the objection is sustained and not later than the 64th day before the day of the election. 64 days before the day of the election is critical for a number of reasons. The main reason is that after 64 days, you all get to decide whether you can cancel your election or not. Now, what's very interesting in statute, if there is some defect relative to the form, like, you know, somebody caught the fact that the notary wasn't correct, or they forgot to fill in their name like they wanted to appear on the ballot, and you didn't catch it, that's a form issue, and you make the decision. I would certainly allow a person to correct it, and your decision on form is final. But if it's a substantive objection, to me, substantive would be the person is not eligible to run and serve, then if you say, oh, yes, he is, or yes, she is, the person can take your decision, excuse me, to the district court for review. So as I said, I haven't seen this happen maybe at all, but I wanted to make you know, and I wanted to make you know that this was available.
So we did have a question come up. Someone thought that clerks were responsible for making sure someone who is running for office had been a registered voter for 1 year. Is that correct?
Well, no, not. It's really not your job, because the affidavit, the acceptance of nomination, basically says that I hereby certify that I meet the requirements to run for office and to be eligible to serve. And then they sign it and they have it notarized. So if somebody objects to that, then you would be responsible for responding, but it's not your job to go into the voter registration list or wherever to do police work to find out if that's the case. That's not your job to serve as, nomination police. Your job would be to respond, and they sign a certified affidavit, and if they're lying, then that's on them. Now, if you're a home rule municipality and you've got, and I know City of Aurora did this, but if you're a home rule municipality, that's a whole different story, because you get to do that. But there's nothing in state statute that says that this is your job. So, and I would, if you are real concerned about this, this is definitely a conversation you need to have with your attorney.
And then a follow-up to that, what happens if they lie?
Well, it's on them. That's perjury, I guess, or is it lie? Yeah, it's libel or perjury. Perjury, I don't know. One of them is in writing, one of it's verbal, and they can be prosecuted. There are violations in state statute. If you look towards election offenses, they can be held liable, and they can be disqualified from either running or from serving. But then it goes to the court. But that's, and I know in small towns, these things. But you can't go by what you know. You have to respond, you have to verify. And if you go by what you know, maybe one day you don't really know at all, and you don't know everything into the decision, and I would just stay away from this.
And then we've got one more following that. Is there a requirement to publish a list of nominated candidates? Or how do people know who's running to file objections?
There's no requirement. It just, some people do it. When I was in Aurora, I did it at the point of, when I was working there, I did it at the point of when they picked up a petition. And because I kept a list of who picked up a petition, which is also not required. And then I made sure that when we posted it, I made sure that people understood it was a list of people who filed a notice of intent to become a candidate. And then once their petitions were turned in, I had another list that said certified candidates with their name and their address, which is public information because it winds up being on the petition. But you're not obligated to do it. I think it's a good idea. But somehow people will know who's running, especially in a small community. They're not going to need a notice somewhere. But if you want to, you can. Just remember, no matter what you do, once you start it, you're going to have to keep doing it. So you have to assess, can you keep it up? Is it important to do it? That kind of thing.
Can you repeat what you called the list of people that pick up a nomination petition?
Yeah, I called them the list of persons who, you can say it however you want to do it. Basically, it was persons indicating a intention to run for office. Because people pick up petitions all the time and not everybody turns them in. So just because somebody picks up a petition doesn't mean they're a candidate or going to be a candidate. So they've indicated their intention to run for office.
Awesome. Thank
Okay.
you. I think we're ready to move forward.
Perfect. Okay, so now let's talk about packets. And I know there's been some, starting to be some, tell me about what's in your packet. And so packets, and I use the word may, because you can do whatever you want in the packets, but these are things that I think are important to include. And if you've got anything else you want to include, you can. One of the things I didn't put down was the town budget. If you want to include the town budget, that would be a great idea. The first and foremost, the things that are important are the instructions to petition circulators. How many signatures they need, including a cushion. You need, the minimum is 10. Please get more. Not everybody's signature will be certified as valid. When the petitions are due, and I strongly urge you, do not release any petitions to anybody before the first day they can obtain signatures, because I guarantee you, if they do, and they promise, I won't get anything until the first day, they will, and those will have to be disqualified. And then you would include, fill in, make sure that when people sign, they fill in every column, so this will keep them. And then when you get the signature, if you're circulating your own petition, or the candidate circulating his own petition, and even if he or she has got somebody who's doing it for them, make sure they understand that when the petition is handed back to the circulator, they check to make sure that everything is filled in, because the question about what happens if the county isn't filled in, I would disqualify that signature. I would disqualify that signature, because it is incumbent. It's very clear that these are the things that must be completed, even if you're just in one county. Now, I had a conversation with a clerk who had a petition where the city was not filled in, but she said, I've been working here, for X number of years, and I know that the address is in the city. Should I disqualify it? And I said, I would if it were me. Because, as I said, where does it stop? You might even know that the incomplete address is part. Do you include that because the address is incomplete? It seems to me that the person signing bears a responsibility, and the person circulating bears a responsibility to make sure everything is correct. If you put it in the instructions, then they can't say, well, nobody told me. I would have them, make sure they use pen. Make sure that all portions of the petition, the affidavit of circulator is complete and notarized, the acceptance of nomination, be as specific as you possibly can, because if you do it at the front end, what you're going to wind up doing is you're going to wind up eliminating a lot of the problems that come in. Candidate calendars. Remember at the last webinar, we talked about creating a separate calendar for the candidates so that they know what their dates and responsibilities are. General information. Some people put together a big packet about, when the meetings are held. Are there any committees that they need to serve on? Are you going to get paid? Is there a per diem? A little bit about the town. A lot of people run for office knowing nothing about the organization they're about to form, or to join, I should say. And then finally, if you are a municipality where you know that money is spent and collected, I would definitely include the FCPA forms on instructions on when and how to use the forms, because there's some forms that are only needed in some situations, but not in others. Like if you're not going to collect any money, you're only going to spend your own money, that's going to be a separate form. And all these forms are available in the Secretary of State's office. And you want to also include the filing dates. Now here I want to talk about the affidavit, the candidate affidavit statement. Watching the listserv, there's been some conversation about separate candidate affidavit statement. For those of you who've heard me say this before when I've talked about Fair Campaign Practices Act, the candidate affidavit statement is a financial reporting form only. Many people include the form in their nomination petition packet because it's easier to get somebody to sign it, fill it out, and complete it, along with the committee registration form at the front end. And then if they don't collect any money, they don't spend any money, the forms are not relevant. But if they do and they haven't filled out the form, sometimes it's more difficult to go after them after the fact. And so if you're going to include it, be sure you're very clear, but also understand that if they don't file the FCPA candidate affidavit form, it does not preclude them from running for office or serving in office. I've looked at a couple of calendars where there's a specific date listed 10 days after they pick up their packet, they've got to return this form. Well, if you're home rule and you got it in your ordinance, I get it. But if you're statutory, and that's not a valid date. And again, not completing it does not preclude somebody from running for office. It's different from the acceptance of nomination that is part of the packet. The other thing I want to say here, and make sure it's really clear, is that all these things that are included in the packet are in addition to the petition and should not be stapled to the petition. You can put them in an envelope and hand them out. You can paper clip them to the petition, but do not staple them to the nomination petition, because the petition only contains the name of the person running, the signature pages, the affidavit of circulator, and the acceptance of nomination. And if you don't staple it together, if you make sure it's separate, then there's not going to be a challenge that there's something wrong with the petition. Questions?
So we did have one come through.
Okay.
What would you do if a petition has a signature on it that is dated after the circulator affidavit date?
I would disqualify it.
Awesome.
Yeah, no signatures, and that's how, and you'll find that in statute. Any signature that has been affixed after the affidavit, the date of the affidavit of circulator is invalid.
Perfect. Looks like the only one for this portion. Do you want to go ahead?
Okay, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what do you do with all those signatures. As I said earlier, yes.
Can I cut you up with one more question really quick?
Oh, absolutely, sure. Yeah.
Perfect. So what if the petition appears to be disassembled?
Okay. There is nothing in statute that speaks to disassembly. However, at least for nomination petitions, however, there is something that speaks to disassembly under the citizen initiative. So remember those instructions you're going to give, and thank you for this question because this is really important. In the instructions, you tell people, you're going to give the petitions to them stapled, and in the instructions to the circulators, you're going to say, make sure the petition remains stapled together at all times during circulation. And then if it's turned in disassembled, I'm not sure I would disqualify it, as long as all the parts were there. Simply because statute doesn't address this one specifically, it is a best practice to not disassemble it, which is why it needs to be very clear that it be in the instructions. And also in the instructions is a statement that the circulator of the petition can be anybody It doesn't have to just be the candidate, and a candidate can sign his or her own petition. These are the kinds of things that do come up as questions.
Awesome. Now I think we're good on questions. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to talk about checking signatures. And as I said earlier, I'm going to recommend that each one be individually reviewed and checked. And here's what you're looking for. The name and the address on the petition match the name and address on the voter registration list. And I want to concentrate on the address. The address must be the same, because in order to sign a petition, the person must be a registered elector. And if you look in Title I, not in Title 31, at the definition of registered elector, there is a discussion about how the addresses must match. Now, on the name, we're going to get into that a little bit in this slide. You also need to make sure that the signer was registered prior to signing the petition. When you get your petition, if you use a list from your county clerk, there will be a couple of columns on the voter registration list. One will be the registration date, and one will be the effective date. Now, the effective date is the last thing that happened. Maybe they changed their name, or maybe if they changed their address, then the original registration date might be earlier than the date they changed their address. Unfortunately, for the effective date, we don't know what they did on that effective date. They could have changed their party, they could have changed their address, they could have changed their name. It could be a number of things, and we don't know what that is. The list will not identify that. So you want to take a look at the registration date column and make sure that it's signed before the date on the petition. With this caveat, the county clerks don't always enter. And remember, people can vote up to and including election day, and I've seen people register to vote on the same day they've signed a petition. But when you look at the database, the date that the registration was actually input can be 1 or 2 days later. If you're not sure about the date, and if the person was registered before they signed, you can leave it off, leave the designation blank, go through, count the rest of the signatures, and if they have enough without that particular signature, they're good to go, and so are you. So I just want to make that. And then if you use DEO Access, just remember that DEO Automated Access, the online lookup, is dynamic, and it changes constantly, not just daily, but maybe sometimes during the day. So they're only listed as the registration date. So you want to check that as well. I think that for purposes of checking 10 or 25 signatures, you're better off using a list you get from your county clerk and recorder. The other thing, we talked about this before, that all portions were completed. And then the next one is make sure that the person signing didn't sign more petitions than he or she were eligible or able to sign. And I already talked about that. If there are 3 board members positions up and there are 6 candidates, one person can only sign 3 of those 6 petitions. And again, you use the date signed as the way to know which ones are valid and which are disqualified. Now, when it gets to the names, be aware that shortened names and nicknames are okay as long as you can make sure that this person with the nickname Bud or the nickname Buzz or Fuzzy or whatever is the person listed under Edward at the address on the voter list. So you don't disqualify somebody because they used a shortened name, you know, like Ted or Ed for Edward, Margie or Marge, or, you know, for Margaret, Patty, Peggy, Trish for Patricia, Pat for Patricia. You don't disqualify somebody if you're reasonably certain that the person and with the address, they are the same. And if they leave out a middle initial or a middle name, you also don't disqualify them. You kind of err on the side of the voter. That's kind of the bottom line, substantial compliance. And then this is really, really important. In a small town, you're going to know a whole lot. But when it comes to doing this, you have to almost forget what you know and verify, verify, verify.
So we do have a couple of questions for you that have come through.
Okay.
The first asks whether there are write-in candidates. Write-in candidates after petitions are due at the 71st day. Is there an extension of time?
If you have to go to the statute, a person can, if you have an ordinance that requires somebody to be, if you're going to be a write-in candidate, you don't have a petition. A write-in candidate is somebody who missed the deadline or did not file a petition, but wants to be considered for office by having a blank line on the ballot where people actually write in that person's name. So you're either or you're or. You're not both. And the deadline for filing a notice of intent to be a write-in candidate is, I believe, by the 64th day before the day of the election. And they have to send you a notarized statement that they intend to be write-in candidate. They don't need a form. They can just write something to you, but it has to be notarized. And then if they do that, then you put a blank line under whatever position they wish to be a write-in candidate for. I hope that answers the question.
I believe it does. If there's a follow-up, I'll let you know.
Okay.
The second asks, does everyone have access to the DOE list?
If you are a municipal clerk and you're responsible for an election, you can apply for DEO access through the Secretary of State's office. You basically would go to their website, and up in the upper left-hand corner, there's a menu, and you go under elections, and you go under, I think, voting, and there is a thing where it says apply for administrative login, and there's a form that you fill out to get your DEO access.
Perfect.
I can put the steps on the listserv at some later point if people are interested.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. The next one asks, do you keep a spreadsheet to house all the information on signers?
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking. So maybe what you could do is raise your hand, and McKenna can unmute you, and you could tell me exactly what it is you're asking.
Yeah.
If you're willing to do that. There should be something at the bottom where you could raise your hand, I think. Or if you tell McKenna your name.
So it looks like you might have to unmute yourself. You're self-muted right now.
Okay. Anybody?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Hi, Karen. It's Heidi over here in the town of Erie. So my question to you is, so trying to keep, so let's say you have 15 nomination petitions that you're checking signature. How do you make sure that like this person hasn't signed 5 and just, I mean, how do you keep all the information? My question was just, what's the easiest way? You keep a spreadsheet on like how you, as you're checking these signatures to try to keep it straight, or do you have a better way?
Well, you could do a couple of things. If you're using a voter list, I know you've got a lot of voters, so I'm not sure how it would work better, but if you have your voter list electronically, you can, what I would do is I would, you know, there's a lot of things, if you get the list from your counties, there's going to be a lot of information that's going to be irrelevant that you can eliminate. And then you can create a couple of blank columns at the front of the person's name, last name first, and one could be the code, check mark, or the, wrong address or whatever. And then the second one could be petition, like you could put a heading that says number of petitions signed. And every time they sign a petition, if you want, you could put a hash mark there. And then once you get to the limit, like if you're, 3, then, how many, but the issue will be whose petition they signed, if they sign more than 3. But again, in their instructions, this would be a really good idea to let them know how many, to make sure that the circulators tell people that they can only sign a maximum of, X.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up.
Okay.
But for folks who don't get their questions answered, I will download questions and make sure we get those to Karen so that we can get those answered for you. So final one asks, what happens if the voter has 2 last names but put one in the middle name box and one in the last name box?
If you can find them on the voter registration list, you count them as valid signature.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I will download the rest of these questions. Karen, I think that's it for your portion of the presentation.
And then you want to talk a little bit about what's next?
Yes, I do. So I do want to start by highlighting the half credit that's available for the webinar. You do need to fill out an assessment form, which will be available at cml.org. You can go to the top menu of our website, go to Education and Training, and then on that drop-down menu, click on For Clerks, and that'll take you to the page where you're able to access both the recordings of these webinars, sign up for future webinars as well. We've got a couple coming up in the next few months, and then also have access to that form, which you will complete and submit to Kathy Novak, and that email will be on that form as well. So future webinars, as you can see, are January 13th. We're focusing on ballots and canceling an election. March.
And let me interrupt here and let you know that is a change in the original date. It was originally scheduled for January 20th, but I had like mucho conflicts. So it's now for January 13th. However, we're still in the nomination petition circulation process. So this will certainly be a timely discussion.
Thank you. And folks, if you did not receive an email from me about that, feel free to reach out and I can resend that. You'll also get a reminder email with that link. So that change should not affect you being able to log in and get onto the actual platform. You don't need to re-register or anything. So you should be good to go. March 10th and then April 21st will be the ones that come after January. So keep an eye out for those. And then we also just wanted to one more time highlight the election book that Karen has helped out with a ton. So thank you very much, Karen. We really appreciate that. Everyone did get one free copy mailed to our members in early November. If your municipality did not receive one, you can contact Melissa Mata in our office. More copies are available for purchase at the CML store as well. And then PDF versions are available for free. You will have to go through the purchase process to get that PDF file, but it will be at no cost. So you should be good to go. Karen, I'll kind of turn it over to you for any final thoughts.
Okay, I want to thank you for attending. I know it's a lot of information. If there are additional questions, once I get the questions from McKenna, I will provide the answers and we'll put them out on the listserv. So everybody will have a chance to see the question and the answer. And I just want to wish all of you a wonderful holiday season. I know that these last couple of years have been really difficult and strange. and weird for a lot of people. So I hope that this year you'll have an opportunity to celebrate with friends and family, and just best wishes for, I don't know, excitement and joy and laughter and not so weird next year in 2022. So again, thank you for attending, and we will we'll see you in January.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for everyone who attended. We really appreciate your time. So see you soon.
Bye-bye.